Have you ever wondered why some women speak most loudly when they say nothing at all? He thought her silence was surrender. He thought it meant confusion, submission, or hesitation. But silence is not emptiness. Silence can be a throne, and she, the woman who has learned to sit upon it without trembling, rules from the unseen. Her quiet is not vacancy but voltage, the kind that cracks through the ego's glass facade. In the dim theater of attraction, men often mistake noise for power. They raise their voices, their ambitions, their opinions, as if the louder they speak, the more real they become. But the femme fatale, the woman who has kissed her shadow and walked through her own underworld, does not compete in that volume. She embodies the stillness that disarms. Her silence is not absence, it is gravity. And when she withdraws her words, his reflection begins to distort. You see, every man carries a secret wound, the terror of insignificance. Beneath his confident posturing lives the child who once needed to be seen to feel real. When she withdraws her gaze, when she no longer explains or pleads, something ancient in him panics. His ego, built upon the fragile architecture of control, begins to crack. Because her silence denies him the one thing his persona feeds upon: reaction. And yet, most women have been conditioned to fill silence as if it were dangerous. To soothe, to explain, to chase harmony even when it costs them their dignity. From birth, they were taught that stillness means rejection, that quiet means they are losing him. So they speak more, text more, try harder, hoping words will rebuild a connection that silence has already purified. But the awakened feminine knows. Silence is not punishment, it is revelation. It shows who can face themselves when the mirror of her attention is removed. She does not use silence as a weapon, but as a mirror, one that reflects a man's true relationship with his own ego. Does he crumble when unseen, or does he hold his own center? There is a moment, subtle and electric, when she decides to stop explaining. She listens to his projections, the accusations, the attempts to provoke, and she simply looks through them. Not with disdain, but with sovereign neutrality. In that moment, the dynamic shifts. He is no longer the dominant force. He is a boy before the goddess trying to prove his worth. Silence in her hands becomes sacred discipline. It is not passive. It is restraint sculpted into art. The sirens of old did not scream, they sang softly or not at all. Their power was in presence, not persuasion. The queen archetype understands this. She does not demand loyalty, she commands it through her absence of desperation. She does not rush to correct misunderstandings because truth requires no defense. And yet this power cannot emerge without pain. Before she learned the elegance of quiet, she was once the girl who begged to be understood. Her nervous system was trained to interpret distance as danger. To unlearn that reflex, to let the silence stand and trust it, is to dethrone centuries of conditioning. There is a kind of fire that burns without smoke. That is her silence. It burns through illusion, through attachment, through the impulse to control how she is perceived. Every time she resists the urge to explain herself, she sharpens her crown. Every time she chooses silence over chaos, she returns home to her own center. He, on the other hand, begins to wrestle with the ghost she left behind. Her absence amplifies every echo of insecurity he tried to bury. He remembers the way she looked at him, not as a possession, but as if she could see the fractures beneath his armor. Without her voice to validate him, he must face what her silence always knew, that his confidence was conditional. And this is the paradox. She breaks his ego not by force, but by stillness. The silence that once terrified her now becomes her liberation. She no longer fears losing him because she has already met the part of herself that needed his validation to exist. That part has died, and in the ashes, something sovereign is born. Tonight, if you dare, sit in silence. Turn off the noise, the endless search for reassurance, and feel what rises in the quiet. Is it fear? Is it loneliness? Or is it power, the raw pulse of presence that no one can give or take? Sit there until the silence stops feeling like absence and begins to feel like command. Because that is where the femme fatale is born, not in seduction, but in self-containment. The woman who can hold her silence does not chase. She magnetizes. Her very stillness becomes an oracle. Men feel it even if they cannot name it. It is the language beneath language, the pulse of the queen, the whisper of the siren, the gaze of the priestess who has nothing left to prove. When a woman stops speaking, the entire masculine world shifts uneasily. Men have built empires, wars, and myths to avoid the stillness that her silence evokes, because silence is a mirror and few can endure their reflection in it. In that quiet, stripped of her laughter, her reassurance, her accommodating warmth, he is left face to face with himself. What he sees is not her absence, but his own dependency disguised as pride. This is the first fracture of the ego. He once believed power meant dominance, control, conquest. But the feminine, in her untouchable silence, teaches him that real power is not external, it is containment. She mirrors his chaos with her stillness, his noise with her restraint. The moment she withdraws from the emotional battlefield, he is forced to confront that his sense of importance was tethered to her response. Without her reaction, he feels like a ghost in his own story. And you, if you have ever been that woman, you know the ache of this reversal. You felt the tug in your chest when you wanted to text, to explain, to chase closure that never comes. But the deeper truth is this. Your silence unsettles him because it exposes the imbalance. You were never the weak one. You were the mirror he used to see himself, and when you turned it away, his reflection vanished. Jung would call this the moment of confrontation with the shadow. The male shadow, born of fear of insignificance, meets the feminine shadow, born of fear of abandonment. They circle each other in invisible dance, his hunger to be validated by her gaze, her compulsion to prove her worth through connection. The silent woman disrupts this cycle. She becomes the alchemist, transforming the wound into wisdom by refusing to feed it. Her silence is not stone, it is sacred laboratory. Every unspoken word, every withheld explanation becomes gold through patience. She does not need to convince him of her value because her restraint already reveals it. The queen archetype reigns not because she shouts her commands, but because her energy bends the room toward her presence. People lean in, trying to decode her stillness. That is magnetism born of sovereignty. In myth, the siren never chased the sailor. She sang to the ocean and let the echoes carry. The man who could not master his own impulses crashed upon the rocks, believing her silence was rejection when it was simply discernment. The femme fatale carries that same frequency. She does not need to destroy him. His own projections will do that work. Her silence holds up the mirror, and he shatters himself against it. But do not mistake this for cruelty. The feminine silence, when embodied with consciousness, is not punishment but purification. It filters what is false. It burns through illusion. It reveals who is drawn to her essence versus who is addicted to her availability. When she no longer performs emotional labor to soothe the male ego, she begins to see clearly who can stand beside her throne and who merely wanted to feed off her reflection. In his confusion, he will often attempt to reclaim control. He will provoke her, demand explanation, create drama to stir her voice. Because to him, silence feels like erasure. Yet the woman who has learned to hold herself does not react. She knows his anger is not about her. It is the ego's final defense against annihilation. The louder he gets, the clearer she becomes. His words reveal his dependence. Her silence reveals her strength. You might feel this power rising in yourself even now, that quiet steadiness, that refusal to justify your boundaries. It feels foreign at first, almost cold. But it is the temperature of truth. When you no longer speak to be understood, you begin to listen to your own inner authority. This is the death of the pleaser, the rebirth of the sovereign. The ancient Stoics understood this. Seneca wrote, "He who does not need approval has conquered himself." The femme fatale lives by this creed unconsciously. She does not seek approval, she radiates certainty. Her silence is the Stoic discipline draped in silk, restraint as elegance, distance as devotion to self-respect. In that sacred quiet, something remarkable happens. The energy that was once spent on chasing, explaining, and proving begins to circulate inward. She feels her own presence filling the room the way air fills a lung. The silence no longer feels empty, it feels infinite. It hums like a crown of quiet fire, weightless, radiant, unbending. And he standing before her senses it. He cannot name it, but he feels smaller in its presence, not because she diminishes him, but because she exposes his smallness. He begins to question what he once called love. Was it connection, or was it conquest? Her silence turns his desire into introspection. For the first time, he wonders if power can exist without domination. This is how the untouchable silence of the femme fatale transforms not only her, but him. She becomes the initiator not through words, but through absence. He is forced to meet the parts of himself that tremble when not seen. And in that trembling, he meets his own shadow. Tonight, try this. When you feel the urge to fill the space, pause. Feel the silence pressing against your skin like a second heartbeat. Let it speak before you do. Let it become your teacher. Because every moment you choose not to chase understanding, you are building the throne of your own power, one quiet, golden breath at a time. There comes a point when the silence between them grows so thick it becomes a landscape. He paces its edges, searching for an entrance that no longer exists. Once, her attention was a door he could walk through at will. Now it is sealed, not in anger but in sovereignty. Her stillness is not absence, it is architecture. It is the palace she built from every word she once wasted. The man who fears insignificance feels this silence like winter air. Cold, unforgiving, it exposes him. Without her warmth, his ego has nowhere to hide. The shadow within him begins to stir, that restless creature that believes validation equals existence. Jung called it the animus-inflated man, the one who cannot bear to face his own inadequacy without an audience. He is not truly confronting her silence, he is confronting the void inside himself. And she, the femme fatale, has learned to sit calmly within that void. Once, it frightened her too. The fear of being forgotten, of being misunderstood, of being replaced, it clawed at her ribs. She spoke to fill the emptiness, gave too much to prove her worth. But now she understands that silence is not loneliness. It is the echo chamber of power. It is where she meets herself, stripped of approval, stripped of apology. The feminine wound of abandonment once drove her to beg for crumbs of attention. Now, through silence, she feeds on her own essence. Every moment she refuses to explain herself is a ceremony of return. She is no longer the girl pacing in emotional hunger. She is the queen at the banquet of her own self-acceptance. To the man who once mistook her for his mirror, her silence feels cruel. But it is not cruelty, it is initiation. She invites him into discomfort, into the mirror of self-awareness that every man must one day face. Does he truly want her, or the feeling of power her attention gives him? Her silence forces him to decide. The myth of Persephone whispers here. The woman who once descended into darkness returns as queen of both worlds. That is what silence does to the awakened feminine. It births her into duality. She can walk in the underworld of her emotions without drowning. She can face the death of connection without losing her crown. Because she knows endings are not annihilation, they are alchemy. Silence is her crucible. Within it, she transforms reaction into reflection, pain into perspective. She studies the space where his validation once lived, and instead of panic, she feels expansion. The room that once echoed with his words now hums with her breath. The very energy she once gave away returns to her in waves. And he senses it. That unspoken power, the way she no longer flinches, the way her gaze lingers not to seduce but to assess. Her stillness terrifies him because it no longer orbits his gravity. He tries to provoke it, to test if her silence will break. He sends messages meant to bait emotion, a compliment laced with nostalgia, a question designed to reopen the wound. But she has learned the language of restraint. She understands that not every vibration deserves her voice. This is the difference between control and command. Control is reactionary, it grips tightly, it fears loss. Command is serene, it knows its value is not conditional. Her silence is not about withholding love, it's about preserving energy. When she no longer performs emotional labor for those who cannot meet her depth, she reclaims her inner economy. Her attention becomes currency, her energy sacred. The Stoics taught that mastery begins with self-governance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved and the raging of the sea falls still around it." This is her silence. She is the rock. He is the sea. The louder his waves, the more profound her stillness becomes. But there is something almost holy in this equilibrium. When he finally stops shouting into the void, when he sits in the same silence she mastered, something inside him softens. He begins to feel not just desire but humility. He senses her not as an object of conquest, but as a presence beyond his reach, and that humbles his ego. For the first time, he listens, truly listens, to what silence is teaching him. And what it teaches is that love cannot be possessed. It can only be met. Her silence reveals this truth like moonlight on still water. The reflection may vanish when disturbed, but the depth remains. He begins to understand that her withdrawal was never rejection. It was an invitation to stand as her equal, not her captor. This is why her silence breaks him, not because it punies. But because it dismantles illusion. It removes the scaffolding of his false dominance, leaving only authenticity. And if he can face that truth without collapsing, he may rise anew no longer as conqueror, but as counterpart. For you, this is the sacred threshold. Can you hold your silence long enough for truth to surface? Can you sit in stillness without rushing to be seen? Because the woman who does that becomes untouchable. Not because she hides, but because she has met herself in the dark and found no need to prove her light. Try this tonight. When someone's absence tempts you to chase, stop. Breathe. Remember, silence is not their power over you. It is your path back to yourself. The more you can sit within it, the less you need to be chosen. Because the woman who can sit alone in her throne of quiet fire is no longer waiting to be crowned. She already is. Somewhere between the last word and the first silence, she disappeared from his narrative, not as a retreat, but as a reclamation. He could no longer find her in the predictable rhythm of reassurance, the soft reflex of caretaking that once fed his importance. She had become something else, a presence he could feel but not reach, like moonlight that refuses to be held. At first he mistook her calm for indifference, but indifference is hollow. Her silence was not. It was alive, dense with meaning, humming with the quiet power of a woman who has made peace with her solitude. It was not a wall but a mirror polished to perfection. Every projection he cast onto it came back to him tenfold. And for the first time, he saw his reflection clearly, the boy beneath the man, the craving beneath the confidence. Her silence was the alchemy his ego needed but did not want. The absence of her reaction stripped him bare. The noise that once shielded him from introspection fell away, and what remained was truth. The truth that he never wanted her, he wanted the way she made him feel about himself. That is what her silence exposes, the difference between love and validation. The woman who embodies this silence walks between worlds. She is both mortal and myth, half queen, half shadow priestess. She carries the authority of one who has witnessed her own undoing and lived to tell no tale. Her crown is invisible but unmistakable. Her steps are measured, not rushed. She no longer seeks safety and belonging because she has become her own sanctuary. You can feel this energy, the gravity that does not grasp, the warmth that does not plead. It is a vibration that says, "I am whole even if you go." Men sense it before they understand it. It disorients them because their conditioning taught them that a woman's love depends on their presence. But she no longer depends, she chooses. And choice, in the hands of a self-possessed woman, is the most feared and desired power of all. The silence she holds is not the silence of suppression. It is not the frozen quiet of the girl who learned that her voice caused rejection. No, this is the silence of transformation, the silence after the storm, the silence of the ocean when it realizes it does not need the shore to define its edge. Jung wrote that individuation is the process of becoming who you are, apart from the masks the world demands. Her silence is that individuation in motion. Every word she withholds is a thread she pulls out from the web of false identity. Each moment she chooses stillness over reaction. She is sculpting her authentic self from the marble of conditioning. The masculine does not yet understand this. He stands before her quiet like a sinner before an oracle. His ego wants to fight it, to provoke a sound that will confirm he still matters. But the deeper part of him, the one buried beneath the armor, feels something sacred stirring. Her silence speaks to that part. It whispers, "You are not your control. You are not your conquest. You are not what you own." If he can listen, truly listen, he will find in her silence the map to his own liberation. But most do not listen. They mistake her detachment for punishment and try to resurrect the old dynamic: arguments, manipulation, apologies born of panic. Yet none of it works anymore. She has already transcended the battlefield. Her silence is not absence of engagement. It is elevation beyond it. And what of you, the woman hearing this? You who has swallowed your voice 1,000 times to be loved, can you feel the shift awakening inside you? That quiet certainty that you owe no one your constant explanation. That your stillness is not coldness but clarity. The world may call it arrogance, but it is simply the posture of self-worth finally unbent. When a woman learns to wield silence consciously, she becomes the mirror the world fears most. Not because she judges, but because she reflects without distortion. Those who live by illusion cannot stand her gaze. Those who live by truth are drawn to her like pilgrims to fire. Her silence ease her temple. Within it, she hears her intuition without interference. The mind, once noisy with insecurity, grows still enough to receive divine instruction. She no longer asks, "What should I say to make them stay?" Instead, she asks, "What part of me believed I needed them to feel whole?" That is the heart of individuation, the reclamation of energy from projection. She no longer throws her light onto others in hopes they will reflect it back. She becomes her own sun, her own orbit, her own axis. And in doing so, she breaks the ancestral chain of feminine overgiving. This silence is sacred rebellion. In a world that profits from her self-doubt, her stillness is revolution, because it cannot be marketed, manipulated, or misused. It exists outside transaction. It is the sound of freedom breathing beneath her ribs. And so, when he finally returns, as they often do, he does not meet the woman he left. He meets the embodiment of silence itself, soft, sovereign, beyond reach. His words stumble before her calm. He realizes, perhaps too late, that her silence was not the absence of love but the presence of power. Tonight, when the world tries to pull you back into noise, resist. When you feel the compulsion to explain, remember, your energy is the currency of the sacred. Spend it only where it is honored. Sit in the quiet until it becomes your ally. Let your silence remind the world that not all queens announce their reign. In the end, there is no grand confrontation, no storm, no raised voices, no tears to mark her departure. There is only stillness, the kind that feels like eternity condensed into a single breath. She stands there, not as the woman he once knew, but as the embodiment of everything he never understood, the feminine unchained from approval. He looks for her reaction, some trace of the familiar tenderness that used to soften his ego, but she offers none. Her silence is complete, not the defensive quiet of a wounded girl, but the sovereign stillness of a woman who has remembered who she is. It does not punish, it does not explain, it does not plead. It simply exists, a presence so calm it becomes unbearable for those still trapped in noise. For the first time, he feels the full weight of what he lost. Not her attention, not her affection, but the privilege of her presence. Her silence makes him realize that her energy was never guaranteed, it was granted. And what is granted can also be withdrawn. The ego that once believed it was adored begins to crumble beneath the revelation that it was merely tolerated. Her silence was not revenge, it was revelation. The kind that turns men into mirrors, forcing them to see what they have long avoided, that love cannot be taken, only met. And as he watches her walk away, unhurried, untethered, something inside him shifts. The noise in his head fades. For the first time, he does not chase. He listens not to her words, but to the echo she leaves behind. That echo is not emptiness. It is wisdom. It is the lesson of the feminine archetype in her highest expression, the queen who reigns through presence, the siren who commands through absence, the priestess who heals through silence. She is all of them merged, the trinity of the awakened woman, standing at the crossroads between mystery and mastery. In her silence, she does not reject the masculine, she refines it. She becomes the forge where ego burns into awareness. Her absence teaches him what her presence could not, that love requires depth, and depth cannot exist where noise reigns. The man who learns from her silence becomes greater. The one who resents it fades. You might recognize this moment within yourself, the instant when you stop needing to be understood, when peace becomes more important than proving your point, when you realize that silence speaks in a frequency only those attuned to truth can hear. That is the moment of individuation, the rebirth of the self as sovereign, no longer fractured by the need for validation. There is a paradox here, beautiful and eternal. The more she withdraws into her stillness, the more magnetic she becomes. Because silence, when it is rooted in self-worth, does not repel, it attracts through contrast. In a world addicted to noise, her quiet is rare oxygen. It is what the awakened masculine secretly craves, a presence that does not compete, does not need, does not bend. This is not coldness. It is sacred neutrality. The kind that allows love to exist without possession, desire without dependency. It is the space where both masculine and feminine can finally meet as equals, not through domination, but through depth. The silence she holds is the culmination of every archetypal journey. The witch learned it through exile, the siren through temptation, the queen through loss. Each archetype found that her true throne was not built in the world's applause, but in the quiet acceptance of her own wholeness. In Jungian language, this is the union of the anima and animus within, the marriage of inner masculine and feminine. The silence that once separated her from others now unites her with herself. She becomes both the voice and the void, the ocean and the shore. She no longer reacts to life, she receives it. And you, hearing these words, you feel the resonance of this truth. You know that silence has always been your birthright, not your punishment. That stillness has always been your power, not your shame. The world taught you to fill the space with explanation, but the soul longs for the sound of your own presence. So here is your final invitation. Tonight, do nothing. Say nothing. Sit beneath the weight of your own silence. Feel how it changes the air around you. Feel the way it steadies your heartbeat, the way it clarifies what truly matters. Do not chase meaning. Let meaning find you. Because this is the initiation. The woman who can sit in sacred stillness becomes untouchable, not because she is unreachable, but because she is unshakable. She no longer moves from insecurity, but from intuition. Her silence becomes her compass, pointing not outward, but inward toward the seat of her own knowing. And when she speaks again, her words carry the weight of universes. Because now her voice is no longer reactive, it is revelatory. Each syllable is deliberate, each glance a sermon. The world leans closer, not because she demands to be heard, but because her silence has already commanded attention. She has become the embodiment of quiet fire, gentle yet unyielding, luminous yet untouchable. The kind of woman whose stillness rearranges the room, whose calm dethrones chaos. Her silence has broken his ego, healed her wound, and crowned her in sovereignty. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.